The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers and clattered against the concrete floor of my auto shop. 9:14 p.m. on a Tuesday that started like any other and ended like a nightmare. The text message glowed on my phone screen, each word burning itself into my brain. I'm a free person, and I decide whether I come home tonight or not. Don't call me until tomorrow. I stared at those words for exactly 30 seconds. Vara Merrinor, my wife of 16 years, telling me she was free. Free from what? From me? From our marriage? From the life we'd built together in this faded auto town on Michigan's South Shore? My fingers moved without conscious thought. I'm not your husband anymore. Don't come back home. Send. Phone face down on the workbench. The shop felt different now, quieter. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the tools and engine parts scattered around my workspace. This place had been my sanctuary for 12 years, ever since I'd scraped together enough money to buy it from old Pete Kowalski. Now it felt like a tomb. I walked to the office in the back corner, my boots echoing in the empty space. The desk drawer stuck like it always did, requiring that little upward jerk to open properly. Inside lay the papers that defined my life: our marriage certificate, the lease agreement for our duplex on Maple Street, bank cards, insurance documents, all the bureaucratic evidence of a life shared. The computer screen flickered to life. First National Bank's website loaded slowly on my ancient laptop. Joint checking account, $8,247. Joint savings, $12,191. Not a fortune, but enough to start over. I transferred my half to my personal account and froze the joint accounts. Let her explain that to whoever she was with tonight. My email to Henderson, our landlord, was brief and professional. Notice of marital separation. Please remove my name from the lease effective immediately. Vara Merrinor will handle all future correspondence. Attach the marriage certificate and a copy of my driver's license for verification. The drive home took 12 minutes. 12 minutes to plan the destruction of a 16-year marriage. Our duplex sat in the middle of Maple Street, a 1960s brick building that we'd been slowly renovating. Half-finished projects everywhere, the bathroom tile work Vara had started and abandoned, the kitchen cabinets I'd been meaning to paint, the front porch that needed new boards. Inside, I moved with mechanical precision. Vara's clothes went into garbage bags, her shoes into cardboard boxes from the basement, her books, her jewelry, her collection of ceramic owls that I'd always hated, everything that belonged to her got photographed and packed. I wanted documentation of every item, every decision. The locksmith's emergency service cost me $200, but it was worth every penny. New deadbolt, new door handle, new sense of security. I saved the receipt. Everything would be documented. The divorce papers printed on our ancient inkjet printer, the one that always left streaks on important documents. I signed them carefully, dated them, and placed them in the center of our kitchen table like a centerpiece, right where she'd see them if she ever made it inside again. 10 minutes after my text, my phone erupted. Incoming call, Vara, declined. Incoming call, Vara, declined. Text message. Zane, what do you mean? Call me back. Incoming call, Vara, declined. Text message. This isn't funny. Answer your phone. Incoming call, Vara, declined. I forwarded the divorce papers to her email address. No message, no explanation, just the legal documents that would end our marriage. Then I sent copies to her parents in Grand Rapids. Let them know what their precious daughter had been up to. By 11 p.m., I'd received 78 missed calls. The phone buzzed constantly against the coffee table like an angry wasp. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat in my recliner, watching the missed call notifications pile up. She arrived at 12:37 a.m. I heard her car in the driveway, the slam of the door, the click of heels on the front walkway, then the fumbling with keys that wouldn't work anymore. Knock, knock, knock. Zane, open this door right now. I slid the divorce papers under the door and spoke through the wood. Read those. Everything you need to know is in there. You can't be serious. Open the door. I'm completely serious, Vara. You said you were free. Now you are. I turned off the lights and went upstairs to our bedroom. Former bedroom. My bedroom now. The sheets still smelled like her perfume, that expensive stuff she'd started wearing 6 months ago. Another change I should have paid attention to. She pounded on the door for another 20 minutes. Then silence. I heard her car start up and drive away. By morning, the house was quiet and the marriage was already over. But that was just the beginning. The next morning brought clarity like a hangover in reverse. Instead of feeling worse, everything became sharp and focused. I'd crossed a line last night, and there was no going back. The question now was how far forward I was willing to go. My coffee tasted better than it had in months. The morning news seemed more interesting. Even the weather forecast felt like good news. Sunny skies and warm temperatures. Perfect weather for starting a new life. The auto shop opened at 8 a.m., same as always. My first customer was Mrs. Patterson, whose ancient Buick needed an oil change and a prayer. She'd been coming to me for 7 years, ever since her husband passed away. "You look different today, Zane," she said, studying my face with the intensity of someone who'd raised 6 children. "Something happen?" "Just a good night's sleep, Mrs. Patterson. Your car should be ready by noon." But she was right. I did feel different. Lighter somehow. Like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't realize was there. The weight of pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. Around 10 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Lily, our 18-year-old daughter. She was finishing her senior year at South Shore High and had been accepted to Michigan State for the fall. "Dad, Mom says you changed the locks? What's going on?" I stared at the message for a long time. Lily was the innocent victim in all this, the one person who didn't deserve to get caught in the crossfire, but she was also old enough to understand that actions have consequences. "Your mother decided she was free to make her own choices. So I made mine. Ask her to explain. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, this is so messed up. Yeah, it was, but I wasn't the one who messed it up. The revelation came at lunchtime. I'd driven home to grab a sandwich and check the mail when I noticed Vara's iPad sitting on the kitchen counter. She'd left it behind in her hasty packing the night before, and apparently forgotten about it in all the drama. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something made me pick it up and swipe the screen. It was still logged into her iMessage account, and the preview notifications told a story I wasn't prepared to read. "Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. When can we do this again? I need you. Zane suspects something. We need to be more careful." The messages were from someone named R in her contacts. I scrolled up, my hands shaking with rage and disbelief. Weeks of messages. Months, actually. Plans to meet. Complaints about me. Intimate details that made my stomach turn. But it was the photos that really destroyed me. Pictures I won't describe, but that left no doubt about what had been happening behind my back. The timestamp on the most recent one was yesterday afternoon, while I was working late at the shop. I scrolled through her contacts until I found the full name, Richard Vane. Richie "Slick" Vane, Vara's high school boyfriend. The guy who'd never amounted to much, who'd bounced from job to job, marriage to marriage, scheme to scheme. The guy who drove a flashy red Mustang he couldn't afford and wore gold chains like he was still 25. Of course it was Richie. Of course. I took screenshots of everything, every message, every photo, every plan they'd made. Then I uploaded them to a secure cloud storage account and emailed myself the links. Evidence, documentation, insurance. The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze of anger and planning. I finished Mrs. Patterson's oil change, rotated tires on a pickup truck, and diagnosed a transmission problem on a Honda Civic. Normal work, normal problems with normal solutions. Unlike my marriage, which had apparently been broken beyond repair for months. At 6 p.m., I locked up the shop and drove to the Mooring, the dive bar where half the town went to forget their troubles. I wasn't looking to forget anything. I was looking for information. Tommy Kowalski, Pete's nephew, was tending bar. He'd graduated high school with Vara and Richie, which made him a valuable source of local intelligence. "Zane, haven't seen you in here for a while. The usual?" "Make it a double, Tommy. And let me ask you something. You still keep track of all the gossip in this town?" Tommy grinned and poured bourbon into a rocks glass. "You know it. What do you want to know?" "Richie Vane. What's his story these days?" Tommy's expression shifted slightly. He glanced around the bar, making sure no one was listening. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious. Heard he was back in town." "Yeah, he's been around for about 6 months. Claims he's flipping houses now, but nobody's seen him buy or sell anything. Drives that fancy car, throws money around, but nobody knows where it's coming from." Tommy paused, studying my face. "You sure you just curious?" I knocked back the bourbon and felt it burn all the way down. "Let's just say I'm taking an interest in local real estate." Tommy nodded slowly. "Well, if you're really interested, he hangs out at the Sunset Motel most evenings. Room 12, has for the past few weeks." Room 12. I memorized that detail and ordered another drink. By 8 p.m., I was parked across the street from the Sunset Motel, watching Richie's red Mustang in the parking lot. The motel was a relic from the 1960s, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask too many questions. Perfect for a cheating wife and her worthless boyfriend. I didn't have to wait long. At 8:30, Vara's silver Honda pulled into the parking lot. I watched her get out, look around nervously, then knock on the door of room 12. Richie answered, and they disappeared inside. That's when I made my first real mistake, or my first real victory, depending on how you look at it. I sat in my truck for exactly 15 minutes, watching the closed door of room 12. 15 minutes to decide whether I was the kind of man who walked away or the kind who fought back. The bourbon made the decision easier, but I would have made the same choice sober. Richie's Mustang sat under the flickering parking lot light like a red flag in front of a bull. It was a 2019 model, probably financed up to its chrome bumpers, with custom wheels and a sound system worth more than most people's monthly rent. The kind of car a man bought when he was trying to prove something to the world. I walked over and examined it closely. Pristine paint job, detailed interior, vanity plates that read, "Slick 1." Even his license plate was a lie. There was nothing slick about a middle-aged man seducing another man's wife in a cheap motel room. The key to effective revenge is proportionality. You don't bring a cannon to a knife fight, but you don't bring a knife to a cannon fight either. This situation called for something more creative than violence, more personal than property damage. I walked back to my truck and retrieved a tire pressure gauge from my toolbox, not to let the air out, that would be too obvious. Instead, I used the metal tip to scratch a message into the driver's side door. Nothing profane, nothing threatening, just 7 words. "Everyone knows what you're doing here." Then I unscrewed the valve caps on all 4 tires and dropped them into the storm drain. Not enough to strand him, but enough to annoy him. A minor inconvenience that would remind him that someone was watching. The piece de resistance came from my tackle box in the truck bed. I'd been planning to go fishing this weekend, back when I thought I had a marriage worth preserving. Instead, I took the small container of bait worms and emptied it into the Mustang's air intake vent, right below the windshield. In a few days, when they started to decompose, Richie's fancy car would smell like a swamp. I was back in my truck and pulling out of the parking lot when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I saw what you did to that car. Smooth move." I glanced around the parking lot but didn't see anyone watching. Probably just some motel guest who'd witnessed my handiwork and approved. In a town like South Shore, everyone knew everyone's business, and cheating spouses weren't popular with the locals. The drive home took me past Vara's office building, a modern glass structure that housed 3 law firms and an insurance company. Her car wasn't in the parking lot, of course. She was still at the motel, still making choices that would destroy what was left of our family. At home, I poured another bourbon and sat down with Vara's iPad. The messages between her and Richie painted a picture of two people who thought they were smarter than everyone around them. They had code words for their meetings, fake explanations for their absences, and a whole mythology built around their love for each other. What struck me most was how little respect they had for me. In their messages, I was the mechanic, the obstacle, the problem that needed to be solved. Vara complained about my work clothes, my simple interests, my lack of ambition. Richie encouraged her to trade up and find someone worthy of her intelligence. Reading those messages was like watching a movie of my own humiliation, but it was also educational. I learned their patterns, their meeting places, their plans for the future. Knowledge is power, and they'd just handed me enough ammunition to destroy both of them. My phone rang at 11:30, Vara's number. I let it go to voicemail. Zane, someone vandalized Richie's car tonight. I know it was you. This is childish and pathetic. Call me back so we can discuss this like adults. I saved the voicemail and went to bed. Let her think whatever she wanted. Tomorrow, the real game would begin. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. I was having coffee on my front porch when a silver Honda pulled into my driveway. Vara got out, followed by someone I didn't recognize, a woman about Vara's age with short blonde hair and a business suit. Zane, we need to talk, Vara called out as they approached the porch. I don't think we do. I said everything I needed to say in those divorce papers. The blonde woman stepped forward. Mr. Merrinor, I'm Crystal Fitch. I work with Vara at the law firm. I think there's been a misunderstanding here. Crystal Fitch. I'd heard the name before, though I couldn't place it immediately. Vara had mentioned a Crystal from work, someone who'd become a close friend over the past year. Someone who'd been encouraging Vara to pursue her dreams and not settle for less than she deserved. No misunderstanding, I said. My wife decided she was free to make her own choices. I'm just respecting her decision. Vara climbed the porch steps, her face a mask of controlled fury. You can't just change the locks and steal our money. That's not how divorce works. I didn't steal anything. I took my half and protected it, just like you've been protecting your secrets. Crystal exchanged a glance with Vara. Mr. Merrinor, perhaps we could discuss this more privately. Neighbors are starting to notice. She was right. Mrs. Clemens from next door was watering her flowers with obvious interest in our conversation. Across the street, old Mr. Kowalski was pretending to check his mailbox while listening to every word. Fine, I said. Come inside, but make it quick. I have a business to run. We sat in my living room, Vara and Crystal on the couch, me in my recliner. The divorce papers still lay on the coffee table where I'd left them the night before. Zane, I made a mistake, Vara began. I was confused, emotional. I didn't mean what I said in that text. Which text? The one where you said you were free, or one of the 100 you sent to Richie Vane? Vara went pale. Crystal leaned forward, suddenly alert. How do you know about Richie? Vara asked. I picked up her iPad from the side table and held it up. You left this behind. Very educational reading. For the first time since I'd known her, Vara looked genuinely frightened. Zane, it's not what you think. Richie and I are just friends. We were talking about old times, that's all. Friends don't send the kind of pictures you sent him. Friends don't meet at cheap motels. Friends don't plan to run away together. Crystal stood up abruptly. I think we should go, Vara. This conversation isn't productive. Sit down, Crystal, I said quietly. We're not finished yet. Something in my tone made her freeze. She looked at Vara, then back at me, and slowly sat down. See, I've been doing some research since last night, learning about all the people in my wife's life. All the new friends who've been giving her advice about her marriage, All the people who think a small-town mechanic isn't good enough for an ambitious lawyer. I opened the iPad and scrolled to a particular conversation. Like this one, where someone named C tells Vara that she deserves better than a grease monkey and should make her move soon. That wouldn't be you, would it, Crystal? Crystal's face flushed red. I was just being supportive. Vara was unhappy. Unhappy enough to cheat on her husband, unhappy enough to plan a new life with her high school boyfriend, unhappy enough to steal money from our joint accounts to pay for hotel rooms. Vara stood up, her composure finally cracking. You don't understand anything. You never understood what I needed, what I wanted from life. All you care about is your stupid garage and your stupid small-town friends. What I care about, I said, standing to face her, is honesty. What I care about is respect. What I care about is not being made a fool of in my own town by my own wife. Well, congratulations, Vara shot back. You've got everyone's attention now. The whole neighborhood knows our business. Good, I said. Let them know. Let them all know exactly what kind of person you really are. Crystal grabbed Vara's arm. We're leaving. This is getting out of hand. They headed for the door, but I called after them. Crystal, you might want to be more careful about the advice you give. Sometimes it comes back to bite you. She turned back, her eyes narrow. Is that a threat? It's a promise. After they left, I sat back down with my coffee and Vara's iPad. There was more to learn, more secrets to uncover, and I had a feeling Crystal Fitch was going to be more important to this story than I'd initially thought. The game was just getting started. The South Shore Public Library hadn't changed much since I was a kid. Same musty smell, same creaky floors, same librarian who'd been there since the Carter administration. But it did have high-speed internet and public computers, which made it perfect for the kind of research I needed to do. I spent the morning learning everything I could about Crystal Fitch. LinkedIn profile showed she'd been working in human resources at Vara's law firm for 2 years. Before that, she'd bounced around between several companies in Grand Rapids, never staying anywhere for more than 18 months. Her Facebook page was locked down tight, but her Instagram told a different story. Pictures of expensive dinners, weekend trips to Chicago, designer handbags that cost more than most people's monthly car payments, all on an HR coordinator's salary. Either Crystal had family money or she was living well beyond her means. But it was her employment history that really caught my attention. 3 years ago, she'd worked for a small accounting firm that had been investigated for embezzlement. No charges were filed, but the firm had closed down 6 months later. 2 years before that, she'd been employed by a real estate company that had gone bankrupt amid allegations of financial impropriety. Crystal Fitch had a talent for being around when money went missing. I printed out everything I could find and drove back to the shop. My afternoon appointment was with Jake Morrison, whose pickup truck needed a new transmission. Jake worked construction and had known me since high school. More importantly, he was married to Richie Vane's ex-wife. Heard you and Vara are having some troubles, Jake said as I popped the hood on his truck. Word travels fast in this town. Especially when it involves Richie Vane. That guy's been trouble since we were kids. Jake leaned against the workbench, his expression serious. You know he owes my wife $3,000 in back child support, right? I looked up from the engine. I didn't know that. Yeah. He's been dodging the court orders for 6 months. Claims he's broke, but he's driving that fancy car and throwing money around like he's some kind of big shot. Jake paused. Linda's been trying to get the state to track him down, but he keeps moving around. Where's he staying now? That's the thing. Nobody knows for sure. He was at his cousin's place for a while, then the Sunset Motel. Now he's supposedly got some kind of rental house on the east side, but Linda drove by there yesterday and the place looked empty. I filed that information away and got back to work on Jake's transmission, but my mind was racing. If Richie was avoiding child support payments, he was probably hiding assets. And if he was hiding assets, there might be other things he was hiding too. After Jake left, I called the courthouse and spoke to a clerk in the family court division. Public records showed that Richie owed $3,200 in back child support and had missed his last 4 court-ordered payments. There was also a bench warrant out for his arrest for contempt of court. Interesting. Very interesting. My phone rang at closing time. Lily's number. Dad, can we talk? I'm at Mom's office. Sure. What's on your mind? This whole situation is really messed up. Mom's crying all the time, you won't talk to her, and now there are rumors all over school about you guys getting divorced. I locked up the shop and walked to my truck. What kind of rumors? People are saying Mom's cheating on you with Richie Vane. Is that true? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because my 18-year-old daughter was having to deal with our family's dirty laundry being spread around her high school. What do you think, Lily? I think Mom's been acting weird for months. I think she's been lying about where she goes at night, and I think you wouldn't have changed the locks unless you had a really good reason. Smart kid. Too smart for her own good sometimes. Where are you right now? In the parking lot outside Mom's office. She's inside with that Crystal woman, and they've been talking for like 2 hours. Dad, I'm scared. I don't want our family to fall apart. Our family fell apart when your mother decided she was free to make her own choices. I'm just dealing with the consequences. But can't you guys work it out? Go to counseling or something? I sat in my truck, looking out at the fading light of another day in South Shore. Some things can't be fixed, Lily. Some choices can't be undone. So that's it? 16 years of marriage and you're just giving up? I'm not giving up, I'm fighting back. There was a long pause. What does that mean? It means your mother and her friends are about to learn that actions have consequences, and I'm going to be the one teaching that lesson. After I hung up, I drove past Vara's office building. Her Honda was still in the parking lot, along with a white BMW that I didn't recognize. Through the second-floor windows, I could see figures moving around in what I knew was the conference room. Whatever they were planning, it was taking a long time. I parked across the street and waited. At 7:30, Crystal emerged from the building and got into the BMW. She sat in the car for several minutes, talking on her phone, before driving away. Vara came out 10 minutes later, looking exhausted and defeated. Instead of following her, I followed Crystal. The BMW led me through downtown South Shore, past the marina, and into the newer subdivision on the east side of town. Crystal pulled into the driveway of a modest ranch house on Elm Street and disappeared inside. I drove past slowly, noting the address and the fact that there were no other cars in the driveway. Crystal lived alone, which was useful information. But as I reached the end of the block, I noticed something that made me hit the brakes. Parked on the street, 3 houses down from Crystal's, was a red Mustang with custom wheels and vanity plates. Richie Vane was visiting Crystal Fitch at 8 o'clock on a Wednesday night, while Vara was still at the office, probably wondering where her boyfriend had disappeared to. I parked around the corner and walked back, staying in the shadows. Through Crystal's front window, I could see 2 figures sitting at a kitchen table. They were leaning close together, talking intently, and there was a laptop computer open between them. This wasn't a social visit. This was a business meeting. I took out my phone and snapped several photos through the window. The images weren't perfect, but they clearly showed Richie and Crystal together in what appeared to be an intimate conversation. As I watched, Crystal got up and retrieved a manila folder from a cabinet. She opened it and spread papers across the table. Richie examined them carefully, occasionally pointing at specific sections. Whatever they were discussing, it involved paperwork, lots of paperwork. I stayed for another 20 minutes, taking photos and trying to figure out what I was witnessing. Finally, Richie stood up and headed for the door. I retreated to my truck and waited for him to drive away before approaching Crystal's house again. The lights were still on, and Crystal was still at the kitchen table. But now she was alone, and she was feeding papers into a document shredder. Whatever those documents contained, Crystal didn't want them to exist anymore. I drove home with my head spinning. Vara was cheating with Richie, that much I knew for certain. But there was something else going on, something involving Crystal and paperwork and secret meetings. Whatever it was, I was going to figure it out. And when I did, all three of them were going to regret the day they decided to make me the fool in this little drama. The game was getting more complicated, but I was starting to understand the rules. Thursday morning brought rain and revelations. I was reading the South Shore Gazette over coffee when a small item on page 3 caught my attention. Local real estate firm under investigation for fraudulent practices. The article was brief, but it mentioned that Pinnacle Properties, a company that specialized in house flipping, was being investigated by the state for allegedly inflating property values and falsifying inspection reports. The owner, Marcus Webb, had been arrested on multiple charges of fraud and money laundering. I'd never heard of Marcus Webb or Pinnacle Properties, but something about the story nagged at me. I drove to the library and did more research. Pinnacle Properties had been in business for 18 months. During that time, they'd purchased 17 houses in the South Shore area, renovated them quickly, and resold them at substantial profits. On paper, it looked like a legitimate business model, but the state investigation had revealed that most of the renovations were cosmetic only. Serious structural problems were hidden behind fresh paint and new carpeting. Buyers were discovering foundation issues, electrical problems, and plumbing disasters months after closing on their renovated homes. More interesting was the company's employee roster. Marcus Webb was the owner and primary contractor. The office manager was listed as Crystal Fitch. Crystal had been working for a fraudulent house flipping operation, and now that operation was under investigation. I printed out everything I could find and drove to the courthouse. Public records showed that Pinnacle Properties had purchased 3 houses in South Shore over the past 6 months. All 3 had been bought at below-market prices, renovated quickly, and resold at significant profits. But it was the financing records that really caught my attention. The down payments on all 3 properties had come from the same source, a shell company called RV Investments, RV, Richie Vane. The pieces were starting to come together. Crystal worked for a fraudulent real estate company. Richie had been financing their operations. And now the whole thing was falling apart under state investigation. No wonder Crystal had been shredding documents. I spent the rest of the morning tracing financial records. RV Investments had been formed 6 months ago, with Richie Vane as the sole proprietor. The company had received several large cash deposits, totaling nearly $50,000. But the source of that money wasn't clear from the public records. $50,000. Where would a guy like Richie get that kind of cash? The answer came to me as I was driving back to the shop. Child support. Richie owed his ex-wife $3,000, but he was claiming to be broke. Meanwhile, he'd somehow come up with $50,000 to invest in a fraudulent real estate scheme. Either Richie had been lying about his financial situation, or he'd gotten the money from someone else. Someone like my wife, who had access to her law firm's client accounts. I pulled over and called Jake Morrison. Jake, it's Zane. Quick question about Richie and your wife's child support situation. What about it? Has Linda ever suspected that Richie might be hiding money? Like, maybe he's not as broke as he claims? Jake laughed bitterly. She's been saying that for months. The guy drives a $50,000 car and wears designer clothes, but he can't come up with $300 a month for his own kids? Something doesn't add up. What if I told you I might have information about where his money is coming from? I'd say Linda would be very interested in hearing about it. Why? Let me do a little more digging. I'll call you back. I hung up and sat in my truck thinking. If Vara had been stealing money from her law firm's client accounts to fund Richie's real estate investments, that was embezzlement, a felony, career-ending and potentially prison-worthy, but I needed proof. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor to the shop. Crystal Fitch walked in around 3 o'clock, looking nervous and overdressed for an auto repair facility. Mr. Merrinor, I was hoping we could talk privately. I wiped my hands on a shop rag and studied her face. About what? About this situation with you and Vara, I think there's been some misunderstandings. The only misunderstanding is why my wife's friend thinks she has any business getting involved in my marriage. Crystal glanced around the shop, making sure we were alone. Look, I know you're angry. I know you found those messages on Vara's iPad, but there are things you don't understand about the situation. Enlighten me. She took a deep breath. Vara's been unhappy for a long time. She feels trapped in this town, trapped in a life that doesn't challenge her intellectually. When Richie came back to town, he represented a chance for her to remember who she used to be. Who she used to be was a cheating teenager who got pregnant and had to get married. Is that really who she wants to go back to being? Crystal's face flushed. That's not fair. Fair? You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been my wife talking to me about her problems instead of running around behind my back. Fair would have been ending our marriage before starting a new relationship. Fair would have been not making me look like an idiot in front of the entire town. She never meant for it to go this far. It just happened. I stepped closer to Crystal, and she instinctively backed away. Nothing just happens. People make choices. Vara chose to cheat. Richie chose to pursue a married woman, and you chose to encourage both of them. I was just being a friend. No, you were being something else. The question is what? Crystal's nervous expression shifted to something more calculating. What do you mean by that? I mean, I've been doing some research about you, Crystal, about your employment history, about your connection to Pinnacle Properties, about your friend Richie's sudden wealth. She went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. You worked for a company that was defrauding homebuyers. Richie was financing their operations with money that came from somewhere, and now that the state is investigating, you're all scrambling to cover your tracks. Crystal straightened her shoulders, trying to regain her composure. You can't prove any of that. Maybe not yet, but I'm a patient man, and I've got plenty of time to keep digging. She stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked toward the door. But she stopped before leaving and looked back. You know, Zane, some people might say you're being vindictive. Obsessive, even. Maybe Vara was right to look for something better. And some people might say that a woman who helps destroy other people's marriages usually gets what's coming to her. Guess we'll see who's right. After she left, I called Tommy Kowalski at the mooring. Tommy, it's Zane. I need a favor. What kind of favor? The kind where you keep your ears open and your mouth shut. I'm looking for information about Crystal Fitch. Anything you hear about her, her job, her money situation, her relationship with Richie Vane. This is getting serious, isn't it? It was serious the moment they decided to make me the villain in their little soap opera. Now, I'm just deciding how the story ends. Tommy was quiet for a moment. I'll see what I can find out. Thanks. And Tommy? Be careful. These people aren't as smart as they think they are, but they're desperate. And desperate people do stupid things. That evening, I sat on my front porch with a beer and Vara's iPad, reading through months of messages between my wife and her co-conspirators. The more I read, the clearer the picture became. Vara hadn't just been cheating on me. She'd been planning to leave me for months, with Crystal's encouragement and Richie's promises of a better life. They'd been moving money around, making arrangements, building a foundation for their new life together. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated me. Tomorrow, I was going to start showing them just how badly they'd miscalculated. Friday morning started with a phone call from Lily. Dad, something weird is happening. Mom didn't come home last night and she's not answering her phone. I was already at the shop, organizing my tools for what I planned to be a very busy day. Did you try calling Crystal? Yeah. She said she hasn't seen Mom since yesterday afternoon. Dad, I'm worried. What if something happened to her? Your mother is a grown woman who made her own choices. I'm sure she's fine. But what if she's not? What if... Lily, listen to me. Your mother is exactly where she wants to be. doing exactly what she wants to do. The fact that she didn't bother to tell you about it just shows you where her priorities are. There was a long pause. You really hate her now, don't you? The question caught me off guard. Did I hate Vara? Or was I just tired of being treated like a fool? I don't hate your mother, but I don't respect her anymore, and I'm not going to pretend that what she's doing is okay. So what happens now? Now we all live with the consequences of the choices we've made. After hanging up, I called Jake Morrison. Jake, remember that information I mentioned about Richie? I think your wife might want to hear this. What did you find? Richie's been hiding assets, significant assets, and I think I know where the money came from. Jake was quiet for a moment. How significant? $50,000 that I can prove. Probably more that I can't. Jesus. Linda's going to want to talk to you. Tell her to meet me at the shop this afternoon. And Jake, she might want to bring a lawyer. The morning passed slowly. I worked on routine maintenance jobs and waited for the pieces of my plan to fall into place. At 11:30, Crystal's white BMW pulled into the parking lot. She got out and approached the shop cautiously, like she was walking into enemy territory. We need to talk, she said. I'm listening. You're making a mistake, Zane. You're so focused on revenge that you're not seeing the bigger picture. I set down my wrench and gave her my full attention. What bigger picture? Vara loves you. She's always loved you. This thing with Richie, it's just a midlife crisis, a stupid mistake that got out of hand. Funny way of showing love. Crystal stepped closer, and I caught a whiff of expensive perfume mixed with desperation. She wants to come home. She wants to work things out. Where is she? She's staying at my place. She's been there since Wednesday night, crying and regretting everything that happened. Interesting. That contradicted what Crystal had told Lily this morning about not seeing Vara since yesterday afternoon. If she wants to talk, she can call me herself. She's afraid you won't listen. She's afraid you've already made up your mind. I have made up my mind. The question is whether she's ready to live with the consequences of her choices. Crystal's mask of concern slipped slightly. What do you want, Zane? Money? An apology? What will it take to make this go away? And there it was. The real reason for her visit. Crystal wasn't here to save my marriage. She was here to protect herself. I want the truth, all of it, about Richie, about the money, about Pinnacle Properties, about everything. Crystal's face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. You know exactly what I'm talking about. The question is whether you're going to tell me voluntarily or whether I'm going to have to dig it up myself. She stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked back to her car without another word. At 2 o'clock, Linda Morrison arrived with a lawyer in tow. Linda was a small, determined woman who'd been fighting Richie for child support for 3 years. The lawyer was a sharp-dressed woman from Grand Rapids who specialized in family law. I showed them everything I'd discovered, the financial records, the connection to Pinnacle Properties, the timeline of Richie's sudden wealth coinciding with his renewed relationship with Vara. This is substantial, the lawyer said, reviewing the documents. If we can prove that Mr. Vane has been hiding assets while claiming poverty in family court, we can have him arrested for contempt and perjury. What about the source of the money? Linda asked. That's where it gets complicated, I said. I think the money came from my wife's law firm. Client accounts, probably. But I can't prove it without access to their financial records. The lawyer leaned back in her chair. That would be embezzlement, a federal crime. Which is why they're all so desperate to make this go away quietly. Linda looked at the photos I'd taken of Richie and Crystal meeting at Crystal's house. What do you think they were planning? I think they were planning to disappear, take the money and run before anyone figured out what they'd been doing. But now you've figured it out. Now I've figured it out. The lawyer gathered up the documents. Mr. Merrinor, Would you be willing to testify about what you've discovered? Absolutely. And you understand that this could implicate your wife in serious criminal activity? I thought about Vara's text message, about her declaration of freedom, about the months of lies and betrayal. My wife made her choices. Now she gets to live with them. After they left, I sat alone in the shop and waited for my phone to ring. It didn't take long. Zane, it's Vara. We need to talk. I'm listening. Not over the phone. Can you meet me somewhere? Where? The lakefront park. By the old pavilion. In an hour. The lakefront park was on the edge of town, near the abandoned summer house that had been empty for years. It was isolated, private, and far enough from downtown that we wouldn't be interrupted. Perfect for a confrontation. I'll be there. I locked up the shop and drove to the park. Vara was already waiting, sitting on a picnic table and staring out at the lake. She looked tired, defeated, and older than her 36 years. You've been busy, she said without looking at me. Just protecting my interests. Is that what you call it? Destroying people's lives? I sat down across from her, studying her face. I'm not the one who destroyed anything. I'm just cleaning up the mess you made. You don't understand what you're doing, Zane. You're going to hurt innocent people. Like who? Richie? Crystal? You? Like Lily? Like yourself? Like everyone who gets caught up in this vendetta of yours? I leaned forward. Tell me about the money, Vara. She flinched like I'd slapped her. What money? The money Richie invested in Pinnacle Properties. The $50,000 that came from somewhere. The money that's going to send all three of you to prison if I'm right about where it came from. Vara's composure finally cracked. You don't know anything. I know enough. I know about Crystal's employment history. I know about Richie's hidden assets. I know about your late nights at the office and your sudden interest in client account management. Stop. I know about the shell company. I know about the real estate fraud. I know about the state investigation that's going to uncover everything you've been doing. Stop! She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. It wasn't supposed to happen this way, she whispered. How was it supposed to happen? We were going to pay it back. All of it. Once the houses sold, we were going to replace the money and no one would have known. But the houses didn't sell, did they? The state shut down Pinnacle Properties before you could unload them. She nodded, still crying. How much, Vara? How much did you steal? It wasn't stealing, it was borrowing. How much? $75,000. I sat back, stunned despite myself. $75,000. More than I made in 2 years. From how many client accounts? 6 different accounts. Small amounts from each one, spread out over 8 months. No one was supposed to notice. But someone did notice. She looked up at me, her eyes red and desperate. The firm is conducting an internal audit. They'll discover the missing money within a week. And then? And then I go to prison. Crystal goes to prison. Richie goes to prison. And you get your revenge. I stood up and walked to the edge of the lake, looking out at the water. Behind me, I could hear Vara crying softly. There's something else, she said. I turned back to her. What? Crystal wasn't just helping us hide the money, she was skimming from the real estate deals, taking her own cut before passing the profits back to us. How much? I don't know. Maybe 20,000. Maybe more. So Crystal had been stealing from the thieves. There was a certain poetic justice in that. Where is she now? Probably destroying evidence, shredding documents, deleting files, trying to cover her tracks. And Richie? He's talking about running, leaving town before the investigation gets too close. I walked back to the picnic table and sat down across from my wife. What do you want from me, Vara? I want you to stop. I want you to let us try to fix this before it's too late. Fix it how? We'll pay the money back, all of it. Richie will sell his car, I'll liquidate my retirement account. Crystal will contribute whatever she can. We'll make it right. And then what? You all go back to your lives like nothing happened? We'll leave town, all of us. You'll never have to see us again. I studied her face, looking for any sign of the woman I'd married 16 years ago. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. It's too late for that, Vara. Why? Because Linda Morrison's lawyer is filing papers on Monday morning, because the state investigation is going to uncover everything anyway, because you can't steal $75,000 and expect it to just go away. She stared at me in horror. You told Richie's ex-wife? I told her about the hidden assets. The rest she'll figure out on her own. You bastard. You vindictive, spiteful bastard. I stood up to leave. No, Vara. I'm just a man who got tired of being made a fool of. As I walked back to my truck, she called after me. This isn't over, Zane. You think you've won, but this isn't over. She was right about one thing. It wasn't over, but I was definitely winning. Saturday morning brought chaos. I was having coffee and reading the paper when my phone started buzzing with calls and texts. The first was from Tommy at the mooring. Zane, you need to know something. Richie Vane got arrested last night. Linda Morrison's lawyer had him picked up on that bench warrant for child support. He's sitting in county lookup right now. The second call was from Lily, hysterical and barely coherent. Dad, the police were at Mom's office this morning. They took boxes of files and her computer. Everyone's saying she's under investigation for stealing money. Is that true? The third call was from a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Merrinor, this is Detective Sarah Walsh with the state police. We'd like to speak with you about your wife's employment situation. Would you be available this afternoon? I called Detective Walsh back first. Detective, I'll be happy to talk with you. But I should mention that I've already provided information to Linda Morrison's attorney about some financial irregularities I discovered. Yes, we're aware of that. Your information was very helpful in obtaining our search warrant. Can you meet us at the state police post at 2 o'clock? I'll be there. Next, I called Lily back. Dad, what's happening? Mom won't answer her phone, and there are reporters calling the house asking about embezzlement charges. Where are you right now? I'm at home. I'm scared, Dad. I don't understand what's going on. Pack a bag and come stay with me for a few days. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Is Mom really going to prison? I closed my eyes and rubbed my temples. I don't know, Lily, but you need to be prepared for that possibility. The meeting with Detective Walsh lasted 3 hours. I provided copies of all the financial documents I'd gathered, explained the timeline of my discoveries, and answered detailed questions about Vara's behavior over the past year. Mr. Merrinor, based on what we've uncovered so far, your wife appears to have embezzled approximately $75,000 from 6 different client accounts, Detective Walsh said. She's also implicated in a real estate fraud scheme that defrauded home buyers out of nearly $200,000. What about Crystal Fitch? Ms. Fitch is also under investigation. We believe she was the mastermind behind the real estate fraud and may have embezzled additional funds from her previous employers. And Richie Vane? Mr. Vane is being held on the child support warrant, but we expect to file additional charges related to money laundering and fraud within the next few days. Detective Walsh leaned back in her chair. I have to ask, Mr. Merrinor, how do you feel about the fact that your information led to these arrests? I thought about that for a moment. I feel like justice is being served. No regrets? No second thoughts about turning in your own wife? My wife stopped being my wife the moment she decided she was free to make her own choices. Everything that's happened since then is just the natural consequence of those choices. When I got home, Lily was sitting on my front porch with a suitcase and a devastated expression. The reporters found me, she said. They wanted to know if I knew about Mom's criminal activities. I told them to leave me alone, but they kept asking questions. I sat down next to her and put my arm around her shoulders. I'm sorry you're going through this. Did you know this would happen when you started investigating Mom? I knew something was wrong. I didn't know how wrong until I started digging. But you kept digging anyway. Yes. Even though you knew it would destroy our family? I turned to look at her. Our family was already destroyed, Lily. I just exposed the damage that was already there. She was quiet for a long time, staring out at the street. What happens now? Now we wait for the legal system to do its job. And then? And then we figure out how to move forward. That evening, Crystal Fitch called my cell phone. You son of a dog, she said without preamble. You've destroyed everything. I didn't destroy anything. I just uncovered what you'd already destroyed. Vara's been arrested. Did you know that? They came to my house looking for her, and when they couldn't find her there, they tracked her down at a hotel in Grand Rapids. She's in custody right now. Good. Good? That's your wife, you heartless bastard, the mother of your child. That's the woman who stole $75,000 and cheated on me with a deadbeat criminal. The woman who lied to my face for months while planning to run away with her boyfriend. She made mistakes. That doesn't mean she deserves to have her life destroyed. What about the people she stole from? What about the families who bought those fraudulent houses? What about the home buyers who are now stuck with worthless properties? Do they deserve to have their lives destroyed? Crystal was quiet for a moment. You don't understand what you've done. I understand perfectly. I've made sure that criminals face consequences for their crimes. Vara loved you. No, she didn't. If she'd loved me, she would have talked to me about her problems instead of stealing money to fund a new life with another man. You're going to regret this. The only thing I regret is not figuring it out sooner. She hung up without saying goodbye. Sunday brought news that Crystal had also been arrested, picked up at Detroit Metro Airport while trying to board a flight to Phoenix with a suitcase full of cash and a fake passport. According to the news report, she'd been planning to disappear permanently. The anchor's voice was calm, almost bored, the way people sound when they're delivering someone else's catastrophe as routine information. Grainy footage showed flashing lights near the terminal, uniformed officers escorting Crystal with her head down, her face partially hidden by a jacket she hadn't bothered to zip. The reporter emphasized the words, fake passport, like they carried extra weight, as if that detail alone explained everything about who she really was. I sat there, absorbing the irony. Even in her final attempt to escape consequences, she'd chosen deception over accountability. Lily and I watched the coverage together on the local news. The reporter stood outside the law firm where Vara had worked, describing the elaborate embezzlement scheme that had rocked the small legal community. The building behind him looked ordinary, brick, tinted windows, a small brass plaque near the entrance. It was strange how something so normal could suddenly become infamous overnight. Lily sat curled up on the opposite end of the couch, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the screen with the intense focus of someone trying to make sense of a world that had changed too fast. The three suspects allegedly stole nearly $300,000 through a combination of client account embezzlement and real estate fraud, the reporter said. The investigation began when the estranged husband of one of the suspects provided financial records to law enforcement. The words hit differently hearing them spoken out loud, packaged neatly for public consumption. Estranged husband. That was me now. A label that reduced months of confusion, betrayal, and late-night realizations into two clean words. They're talking about you, Lily said quietly. Yeah. There was a pause after that, the kind that settles in when there's nothing left to clarify. How does it feel to be famous? I'm not famous. I'm just a guy who got tired of being lied to. The phone rang. Vara's parents. I hesitated before answering, already bracing myself for what was coming. Grief, anger, accusation, some mixture of all three. Zane, what have you done? Vara's mother was crying. Our daughter is in jail. They're saying she might go to prison for years. I didn't put her in jail. Her choices put her in jail. You could have worked things out privately. You didn't have to involve the police. She stole $75,000. That's not a private matter. There was a sharp inhale on the other end, as if she hadn't expected facts to interrupt her emotions. She's the mother of your grandchild. How could you do this to family? She stopped being family when she decided to betray everything our marriage stood for. The line went silent for a moment. Then Vara's father took the phone. His voice was steadier, colder. This isn't over, Zane. We're going to fight this. We're going to prove that you drove her to this. Good luck with that. I hung up and turned off the phone, setting it face down on the counter like a finished argument. Monday morning brought the final piece of the puzzle. Detective Walsh called to inform me that all 3 suspects had been formally charged. Vara faced 6 counts of embezzlement, 2 counts of money laundering, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit fraud. Crystal faced similar charges, plus additional counts related to her previous employment fraud. Richie faced charges of money laundering, fraud, and conspiracy. Walsh's tone was professional, almost clinical, as if he were reading off inventory instead of outlining the collapse of multiple lives. The prosecutor is asking for significant prison time, Detective Walsh said. Your wife could be looking at 8 to 10 years if she's convicted on all counts. I closed my eyes, not in relief or sadness, but in acknowledgement. This was real now. Final. What about plea deals? That's up to the prosecutor and their defense attorneys. But given the amount of money involved and the elaborate nature of the scheme, I wouldn't expect any sweetheart deals. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen and thought about the past week. 7 days ago, I'd been a small-town mechanic with a cheating wife and a failing marriage. Now I was the man who'd exposed a major financial crime and sent 3 people to prison. The transition felt unreal, like someone had swapped out my life while I wasn't looking. The house was quiet. Lily had gone back to school trying to finish her senior year despite the scandal surrounding our family. The reporters had moved on to other stories. The neighbors had stopped staring quite so obviously. Normalcy was creeping back in small, careful steps. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You think you've won, but this isn't over. We'll see who has the last laugh. I read it once, then again, searching for any emotional reaction, and finding none. I deleted the message without responding. Let them threaten, let them plot, let them rage against the consequences of their own actions. I'd played their game and won. Now they could play the legal system's game and see how that worked out for them. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat on my front porch, watching the sun rise over South Shore. It was going to be a beautiful day, and for the first time in a long time, I had nothing to hide and nothing to fear. The truth had set me free.